we're featuring a guest speaker to speak on a topic about mental health and educate the public about mental illness and how it could affect their families, friends, and how the church can play a part in mental health awareness. Today we have joining us B. Cote. She is the founder and executive director of Impact LLC. Welcome to the Fresh Anointing Show, B.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, so as we get ready to dive into this, I hope you've had a great morning, starting off as we move into the afternoon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm kind of a second shift person, so this just gets my day going here.
Yes, yes, yes. So, first of all, tell us about your organization, Impact. How did you get it all started and moving towards mental health?
Okay. And I have actually two organizations, but the one we're going to mostly focus on today is Impact. Impact is a state certified domestic violence intervention program, a DVIP. Um, Throughout the country, they may be known as BIPs, battering intervention programs. And what we do is we work with the men. At this point, I only work with men who have been abusive of their partners or former partners. And that could be wives, girlfriends, and exes. And so I started Impact in 2007 because I saw a need for a second program that was able to specialize in, uh, I guess, in developing a program that more directly and quickly addressed the needs of the community. And so that's what we do. And right now it's a private program. I'm hoping to, in the next couple of years, bring it under my nonprofit. The nonprofit is called Step Up to Family Safety. One thing about our programs is that we don't get any funding. We have
Mm,
no public funding. And I'll explain more about why. But so by nonprofit then provides scholarships to some of my impact guys to make it possible for them to attend and complete impact.
mm,
And that's we kind of level the playing field that way and make the services more accessible by providing those scholarships. So that's the role that my nonprofit plays right now, but eventually Impact will be under Step Up to Family Safety, and uh,
okay.
and hopefully be able to access some grants that way. It's interesting that while we're on the topic of mental health awareness, one thing I really wanted to point out to you and to your audience is that domestic violence is not caused by any mental health problems. And
Wow.
that, right, right. See, that's a big huh, right? Most
Hmm.
people just assume that there's something wrong with these men who abuse, right? Or they wouldn't abuse. But the reality is that they abuse almost always because something makes them believe they are entitled to abuse.
That's very interesting. I want to come back to that. I want to come back to that if
Yeah.
we can dive into that in just a few minutes. But before that, what really drew you to this type of work?
Well, I am a clinical social worker and I am a marriage and family therapist. And many years ago, I've got a lot of experience in doing child protective service work. And many years ago, we didn't realize how much domestic violence impacted children's safety. And so we were just starting to dig into that when I was doing child protective services. And guess who raised their hand and said, I'll I'll get trained in that. I'll do that because I just always look forward to learning new things. And I had been a victim of domestic violence at one point many years ago, and that gave me enough of an understanding of what it's like to be a victim of domestic violence. But on the other hand, I that was one incident 30 years before, and so I didn't really identify, as a domestic violence victim. But I came into the field professionally with an understanding as a victim. So when an opportunity came up to run a DVIP, a domestic violence intervention program, I took that opportunity. And so I've been working exclusively with abusers for over 20 years at this point. And so
Wow.
that's right. And so that's my game. That's what I do. That's my thing.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you alluded to earlier. Now, I was a police officer, and I would get these calls for domestic violence, and I would get to the call, and as I'm getting ready to take this guy out, put him in handcuffs, and take him, arrest him, take him uh, down to the station, the person that made the phone call, the lady, whether it was girlfriend or wife, would come running and say, "No, no, no! Don't arrest him!
Right.
Don't arrest him!"
Yeah.
And and I never understood
And
that.
that's so,
You make the call,
yeah, because,
yeah, you make the call. We come out, and now you're saying
right,
no, 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 and you see that you're bruised and you're beaten and battered, but you still say no, no, no. Now,
yeah,
what?
yeah.
Talk
And
to
that's
us about that.
so frustrating for the police. I get that. So, what that's about is that she wanted immediate relief from the abuse.
Wow.
Okay. What she wanted was for him to stop abusing her. She didn't necessarily want him to go to jail. She didn't want him to be in trouble. She didn't even want to break up with him or lose him. She probably just wanted the abuse to stop. But these relationships are so entangled. It's such a complex problem. And one way that I get people to understand um, why victims don't leave is I put up on the whiteboard two columns, right? The first column is she stays. And I ask people to list all the things that might happen if a victim stays in an abusive relationship. So we start listing things, right? She could die. She could be horribly abused. You know, you go on and on. Um, and then I put up a second column. She leaves. What might
Mm.
happen if she leaves? And so, what are some of the things that you would put there, Jay? What might happen to her if she leaves an abusive relationship? She has to
Yeah,
change her whole life.
exactly. And I've seen that happen where this person has to go into some sort of hiding, to a
Right.
secret place where
And,
nobody knows where she
right.
is
Yep.
because her life is in danger
Right.
now.
Right. So, and she is removing herself from her community, her neighborhood, possibly her church, from her friends, from her job, possibly. She may be removing herself from the only source of income for her children. She's removing her children from their father. And guess what? She's a lot more likely to get killed. So the statistics tell us that of the domestic violence murders, 75% of victims who are murdered because they left.
So
As if,
be go ahead. I'm sorry.
as
Finish.
if that's not shocking enough, That is only the reported confirmed separations. My guess is that 95% of victims who are murdered because they were leaving or had just left or refused to come back. So, therefore, why we would question why a victim doesn't leave an abuser, it just blows my mind because the risk is so much higher for those who leave. And some victims know that. They know that if they stay with him, at least they know where he is.
Wow. So tell us, what would you tell that woman that's being abused? And I know there are some men that are abused by women, but it's mostly the woman that's being abused by the male. So what would you tell that person that's being abused?
Well, I think it's important to understand that we know very little about abuse unless it's physical, right? We don't identify abuse as abuse unless somebody's being beaten,
Right.
right? Which means that victims may not know they're being abused if they're being abused in other ways. And abusers may not know they're abusing if they're not beating. I can't tell you how many of my guys say, I didn't put my hands on her, because that's all we learn growing up, right? The guys learn you don't put your hands on a woman. I have had guys who purposefully did things other than beat her, thinking that wouldn't be abusive. For instance, headbutting her. For instance, beating her with a belt rather than his hand.
Hmm.
Because nobody has identified to them what domestic abuse really is. So the term domestic violence is misleading, but we use it all the time and we'll continue to use it. But it's actually any pattern of controlling, coercive, or abusive behaviors, right? But if you look at, there's a power and control wheel, and I'll be happy to send it to you if you want to post it. But
Hmm.
if you look at, in fact, if you'll hold on just a second, you can edit this out.
Okay. We are talking with B. Cote today. She's the founder and executive director of Impact LLC. And we are talking about the topic at this particular moment of domestic violence. And B, share with us some more of what you were talking about, because I do want to follow up with what you were saying, because we associate violence with physical, but there's also emotional and mental, and also, as you alluded to, there's that controlling of the
Right.
mind.
The controlling of the mind. And that is, many victims will tell us that's the worst thing. That is worse than being beaten. Some of them will take a beating
Mm,
rather than the emotional beatdown,
wow.
right? Because what happens is it steals their soul, it steals their essence, it steals who they are. And so they may even believe that they are at fault, that they are responsible, because he's led them to believe that. Here's what I wanted to show you. This is the workbook that my guys use in the program. And as you can see, it's pretty hefty, right?
Yes.
And what it does is we address all of the thinking and behaviors and entitlements, but mainly the core beliefs that led them to believe that it was okay to abuse, whatever their reason was. And that's that entitlement. So when we look at the power and control wheel, hopefully you can see it here. I
Yeah,
know
I
it's
see.
not.
We see. Yeah, that was really good right there where you
Yes,
have it.
yes. So this is the power and control wheel. And if you will look, the outside ring says what?
Yeah, sexual violence.
And physical violence.
Yes.
And what does the inside say?
Well, I can't see the inside. Oh, you mean the big
The black circle,
power and control?
power and control.
Hmm.
Guess what? Pretty much the only criminal behavior on this wheel is that black ring on the outside.
Power and control.
No, the physical and sexual violence.
Oh, the outside ring. Okay.
Yeah, the outside ring is pretty much the only criminal domestic violence, but yet that's all we know of to be domestic violence. What we have on the inside are things like, hold on, let me see, using intimidation, using coercion and threats, using economic abuse, using emotional abuse, isolating her, using other people,
Mm.
using their male privilege or other privileges they may have. And so all of those things can be part of that pattern that we talked about. And it's not going to get recognized until it's a beating. By then, so much else will have happened that
Hmm.
led up to that. That's where the complexity gets into play. So, Jay, you and I are married, right? Let's say you and I are married. Apologies to any Mrs. Richardson out there. Uh, all right. So you and I are married, and just to show you how complex it is, you have never ever abused me before, but you've had a really, really bad day at work, right? And you come home, I'm cooking dinner, and you go take a shower, and you come out of the shower ranting and raving because I've left my wet towels on the floor again. I hit you over the head with my cast iron frying pan and I lay you out. Who's the abuser?
Well, you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And who's going
Yes.
to jail?
You are.
Absolutely. Right? So
Right.
let's keep the exact same scenario, but put a little bit of history in there. Jay, you've abused me before. And you've told me that the next time I F up, you're going to kill me.
Mm.
So, same exact scenario. You've had a bad day at work. You come home. I'm cooking dinner. You come out of the shower. You're ranting and raving. And you look at me and you say, I'm in the kitchen. You're coming toward me and you say, what did I tell you would happen the next time you F up?
Wow.
I pick up that frying pan and I hit you over the head. As a police officer, who are you locking up?
I'm locking you up because, yeah, exactly.
Right?
Because we don't get the other side of the story.
You don't get
Th-
police officers
th-
are not going to look for the background, the history, the complexity. Right?
right.
They're not going to look for the nuances. They're not going to look for threats because you, at that moment, did not hit me. I didn't have any marks or bruises. How am I going to convince you as a police officer that my life was in danger?
Yeah, that is wow. This is so good some good information that we really don't really recognize. And even as law enforcement, you don't really understand what's behind the scenes now. You
Right,
don't know what is going on in this, like you say, history. What's the
right,
history behind that?
right. What's the
Again,
danger? What's the risk? Because when
right.
I look, I've done police ride-alongs, and what was really interesting to me, I did one just a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and what was interesting to me is that the cop I rode with was a training officer. So, and he had all his domestic violence brochures and everything in his little book that he takes to the scene, and he was a super super nice guy. And it was in the dead of winter. It was raining. I was riding third shift, and so nothing was happening, right? And by the way, if you're going to speed or run stop signs, do it in the dead of night when it's pouring rain. You're not going to get stopped. Jay's not going to tell you that, but I am.
Right.
So, so this was a call was made by a mom, who was on the phone with her 19-ish-year-old daughter, who was being abused by her boyfriend, who was dragging her around, was one of the things that mom said when she called 911. And so the interesting thing is that this girl was 33 weeks pregnant by this boyfriend. And so we get out to the scene. I don't see the boyfriend anywhere around. The young lady is there. She's 4'10", if an inch, right? Very pregnant. May have had some delays, some developmental delays. I'm not sure, but it seemed to me like she might. The aunt was there because she had been able to respond more quickly than the mom. I think the mom was on her way, but she dispatched the aunt to go, handle the situation and look after her daughter. And so two rookie officers joined us. They took the girl and her aunt off, and I decided to stay with my training officer to interview the boyfriend, who was, it turns out, there. But he was behind me in a dark living room, laying on a couch with no shirt on. And so I didn't see him because he just kind of blended in. And do you know that he never even sat up? He
Wow.
never even sat up. And the interview went something like this. What's your name? Are you the boyfriend? Yeah, I guess. What happened here? Nothing. That was pretty much the interview of the abuser, or the alleged abuser. So the rookie officers come back in with the young lady and her aunt, and they say she said nothing happened. So we left. And the cops said this happens all the time. So the first thing that became clear to me is that because, by the way, the neckline of her shirt was completely distended, which to me confirmed what her mother had said about her being dragged. And remember, she's very pregnant, which is a huge high risk for domestic violence. Okay. It shouldn't be, but pregnancy, women who are abused during pregnancy are abused at a higher rate than they're ever in any kind of accident.
Wow.
Okay. So, and they're often murdered. So anyway, so the other thing that the training officer, no, the rookie said, you know what? She told us that they just had an argument, and that in fact she scratched him. Bingo. I knew right then and there that if reclining boyfriend, I call him, had shown a scratch, she was going to jail. It didn't matter what else. So clearly the police were only looking for injuries, physical injuries, not other signs. They were looking for injuries. If there were injuries, they were locking up the person causing the injuries. And it wasn't domestic violence if there were no injuries. So therefore, they also didn't see an opportunity to provide her with resources and protection. They could have handed that brochure to the aunt. I knew that the girlfriend wasn't going to give up her boyfriend. No way was that going to happen. She's not going to give up boyfriend when she's just a month away from delivering his baby. Right? And like I said earlier, what she just wanted, she called her mom because she wanted the abuse to stop. She wasn't going to turn in the boyfriend. So there was an opportunity there for the police to educate, but that's not their job. Their job was to see if a crime had been committed, and it had, but they were looking for the wrong things. And so what the police's job and the community, others in the community really, is to see who the predominant aggressor is. So back to the frying pan scenario where you and I were briefly married.
The assault and battery of a frying pan, huh?
Right. So back to that scenario, you see, in both instances, according to the police, I am the criminal.
Hmm.
Because we don't really train police, and it's a mentality shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, cops are black and white, probation officers, same thing,
Yes.
black and white. If there are injuries, then we're locking up the person causing the injuries. And then that's the only time there's really domestic violence. Therefore, that's the only time somebody's at risk.
So let's go back to impact. Now, in the midst of all of this, what you have explained to us, impact helps those people that
Abusers.
the abuser.
Yeah.
So what are the factors that contributed to this domestic violence?
Right. Thank you for bringing us back to that. Like I said in the beginning, it is not because of mental illness. If it were because of mental illness that they abuse, then they would abuse anybody around them.
Mm.
Because mental illness is not going to allow you to pick and choose your victim or
Good
your time
point.
and place. Same with drunkenness or alcohol abuse or substance abuse or an anger problem.
Hmm.
Domestic violence is also not about anger,
You're bringing out some things that really
right?
the normal people walking
They don't
on
know.
this earth, they don't really know that and
Don't
understand
know.
that because we
So,
look at it differently.
right, right, exactly. And so while a lot of my guys, probably about the same as the regular population, may have issues with depression, anxiety, or the biggest one lately is, and victims always fall for this, he was badly abused or mistreated as a child. Victims always stay and try to help him. They fall for that each and every time. And that may very well be,
Hmm.
but that still somehow in him gives him permission to now abuse. That's still not a mental health problem. So we in our program is a group program. So they come for an intake first, and then they come to a weekly hour and a half group for a minimum of 26 weeks. But they also have to finish this big bad.
So we have a couple minutes left. Success stories from
I have so many. I have
yeah.
so many. Believe it or not, I have a program called Legacy where my guys who complete impact are invited to continue to stay as volunteers and continue to do their work on themselves, because this is a lifelong, like a lifelong mission, right? Um, and so we can't change somebody's whole belief system and thinking in 6 months. They have to continue to work on themselves. And so Legacy allows them to do that. They have their own monthly group meetings, and they come back into the regular impact groups at least once a month. Some come every week. And that way they continue to work on themselves, and they help the other guys in the group understand concepts that the newer guys are struggling with. And
Okay.
that is so powerful. So it's actually the group process. It's the other guys, it's the senior guys in the group, the guys who've been there longer who make this work. Because there are very few places where men can go and be real with themselves and
Hmm.
be humble and be accountable, right? Without getting shamed. You know, that whole man box, what it takes to be a real man, it,
Right.
there's some awesome stuff in there, but there's also some really bad stuff that really makes life hard for men. And so what the impact program does is it allows them to break through all that and to re-examine that lifetime's worth of belief systems and thinking that led them to the decision to abuse. And so most guys come in with a real sense of shame, and so they're not monsters. They or at least most of them, right? Some are, but most of them are not monsters. Most of them, when they realize the impact, the huge impact, especially on their children, of what they've done, they work hard to make the changes necessary. But it's a commitment.
Yeah. Now, before we close out, what would you tell that woman that may feel like she's in the midst of domestic violence, whether it be physical, whether it be mental, emotional? What would you say?
Well, probably she doesn't know she's in the midst of domestic violence if it's not. So I want to give her permission. I want to give her permission to feel her feelings, right?
Mm,
And to understand that it's not anything she's done and it's not anything she can do to fix it. It's on him.
mm,
And
wow.
the best thing that she can do is do whatever it takes for her to stay safe, whether that means staying, whether that means leaving, but get all the resources out there. And there are a number of resources, but you can call the national hotline, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I'm sure, Jay, that you'll put these resources up when this goes to press. But contact the 1-800 number, get information. They even will tell you where the abuser programs are, like mine. So not just victim services, but abuser program. And by the way, every shelter that gets funding also has to serve male victims equally. And almost all domestic violence services that get grants also have free counseling for victims. And that doesn't mean just people who go to shelter. Most domestic violence victims don't need to go to shelter. Most domestic violence victims just need some help. And so there you can get free counseling that way. Almost every community has a victim assistance program that will help walk victims through getting a restraining order. And yes, restraining orders do help. No, they don't stop bullets, but they are a path to getting help and to showing your efforts to try to stay safe. So
Well, B, it's been great having you on the Fresh Anointing Show. We have 1 minute left. Tell us how someone that's in need of your services can get in contact with you.
well, thank you for that opportunity. So you can go to www.impactdv for domestic violence.org. So www.impact.dv. And you can access us that way. We do take self-referred people. We do take men who have not physically abused. We have a whole bunch of those, believe it or not, who have never physically abused their partners. But if you want help, we're there to provide the help for you.
Wonderful. Is there a phone number or just a website?
Just the website will lead you to the phone number and an inquiry and everything else. So I don't want to, have people have to feel like they have to write everything down. So just the website should do it.
Well, great. Thanks for being a part of the Fresh Anointing Show once again. Great information, some things that I didn't even really understand, and you have brought out some great points. And so we look to get you back sometime in the near future to talk some more
Part
about
two,
this. Yeah, part two, right? Exactly.
we have to
Well,
continue our relationship here, Jay.
yes. Well, thanks again, family, for joining us on the Fresh Anointing Show. Until next time, may the Lord bless you real good.
Thank